Welcome to the podcast series, Irish by the Grace of God. And here's your host, Tony Gorman.
Hello everybody. Today's podcast is with Gerry Rickards, a native of Duleek, County Meath, who now resides in Mozambique, North Africa. Just a quick heads up, the audio quality in the first 15 minutes is a bit scratchy, but bear with it as Gerry has a fascinating tale to tell. Okay guys, welcome to our latest episode of Irish by the Grace of God. I have with me Gerry Rickards, and Gerry's an old buddy who I haven't spoken to in 40 years, I suspect.
Yep.
So we briefly chatted on the phone during the week just to set this up. So it's great to see you, Gerry. I know
good to be here.
You've had a very colourful career since you left school in terms of travel and stuff like that. So I think the listeners will be very, very interested to hear your story. I think the last time we met was in school, 5th year and 6th year we shared, and we used to have this this phrase where I don't know where it came from, but it was every time I'd see you, I'd just stop you and say, "You make me sick. You know why you making me sick? You're so stupid."
Because you're so stupid. I had no idea where that came from or why it was meant to be. I think some sort of cool mafia persona.
Yeah, it must have been some Godfather type film or series that was on years.
Has to be, yeah. It's hard to imagine that it's like 40 years. I mean, I think the last time I told you before this week, it was probably our last day at school. I would imagine. Unless we met at a wedding or something.
No, I don't think so.
Maybe showing up.
Yeah, we kind of took different paths. We took different paths. I went off, to college in Dundalk and then West Cork, and you did your thing, which we're all going to find out about now. So, you're a native of Duleek.
Yeah, County Meath. Yeah.
County Meath. So, Duleek, to me, is famous for... Well, you can counter this, but I know the Gallagher brothers, Liam and Noel, did a bit of holidaying there, didn't they? From Oasis.
That's right. Yeah, their father was from Duleek, and they went regularly on the holidays as kids from Manchester. As did I, because I was born in England actually. My brother and sister were born in England, and my parents were immigrants in the 50s, as many people were obviously at that time, and so they left Duleek in the late 50s, and I was born in England and brought up in England until I was 11 years of age.
Wow, didn't know that. Never knew that. Yeah, did you not know that? No.
Yeah, it's funny. Some people will say to me still that, "Oh, did you ever work in England?" Because they can hear the odd words slipping through, you know.
Yeah.
Strange.
Yeah, you probably don't.
Yeah, the Gallaghers.
Yeah, go ahead.
Sorry. The Gallaghers. Literally, and I actually, their father was also still. He was a regular in Duleek, even when I was going back visiting in the last few years. You'd often see him in the bars, professing his fame and glory to one and all, you know, who he was and who the father of was. So yeah. Not much else about Duleek, but I can say it's famous for. I mean, historically it's a famous village, of course, but nowadays. You know,
I remember going to a youth disco in Duleek, and I was playing fantastic air guitar in the middle of the disco, and some of the locals took exception to this, either because I was from Limerick or I wasn't from Duleek, or they didn't like my air guitar style. But but only for a few local Duleek people that I knew. I think I was in big trouble.
I can't imagine where you were. Probably the GAA pavilion or the local parish centre, one or the other.
Yeah.
Oh, those are the days.
So you went to secondary school, obviously, in St. Mary's in Drogheda. I say obviously because that's where I met you first. So I met you in 5th year and 6th year, and I would say that you were probably, this is my impression, you were probably top of the class. You'd been a fairly studious type guy. Is that fair to say?
Yeah, it would be fair to say. I mean, I enjoyed school, I guess you could say. Looking back on it, it was a tough old grind when you think about what the curriculum was and, the study we had to do. But I've always been a reader, and always been somebody who's studious, I guess. But I don't think, correct me if I'm wrong, not to the extent that it affected me from a social point of view. I enjoyed myself socially all the time. I wasn't like a bookworm with a head in books all the time, and not being a social person, I remember school very fondly. I had a lot of friends and a lot of fun and a lot of laughs, and that's amazing to think that's 40 years ago and just like that,
It's ridiculous. Yeah. No, I always remember you could always have a bit of crack with Gerry, So I must admit I enjoyed my 2 years there. But we were discussing the other night, some of the treatment some of the teachers got was, I kind of look back at it now, and like to us at the time it was a bit of fun, if you could get a reaction from the teacher. But Jesus, it just you put them under so much pressure and stress, I guess,
Yeah, kids can be cruel, can't they?
But
I'm not sure if it's any better these days, to be honest with you. But I think we caused a lot of stress for certain teachers. I won't mention any names. Actually, as I mentioned to you the other day, I got to know some of them quite well after the years because I ended up a friend of Sean Conlon, our Latin teacher.
Yeah.
My Latin teacher. I don't think he did Latin, Tony, as far as I remember.
No.
Sean became a very good friend of mine, and he was only a young lad when we started in St. Mary's. I think I said it to you. I think he was like 23 or 24 when, just a new teacher.
Yeah.
He's about 10 years. He's got about 10 years on us, and I became a good friend. And still am a good friend. And anytime back in Drogheda, we get together and we play some music together. We actually even had a duo together at some point when I was still living in Dublin, and we played the pubs of Drogheda for a couple of years. We went by the name of Man the Van, awful name that I came up with. We played for a couple of years around the pubs and the circuit of Drogheda.
Jeez, brilliant. But you actually played the gig scene in Drogheda. Jeez, that's a bit, because in fairness, Drogheda was a great town for music, live music gigs. Yeah. You had the Gem back in the day. You had Joey Maher's. I can't remember the place up there.
The Boxing Club, of course.
Yeah, so it was brilliant.
Great gigs there. I mean, there was a small group of people who organised the gigs. I remember Tony Clayton Lee being one of them.
Yes.
Tony's a journalist now, the Irish Times and music journalist. And the gig scene was really, really thriving for in the early 80s. All the way through. I went to many, many good gigs. The Swan Inn, I remember, being another particularly place. All the. You remember all those bands that sort of threatened to be the new U2s in the 80s?
Absolutely.
They all played up there in Drogheda. I remember seeing bands like Light a Big Fire. Do you remember them?
Yeah. Mama's Boys and Tuanua.
Mama's Boys, yeah.
Okay.
And all the folk bands all went through, Christy Moore and all
Brilliant,
all that.
brilliant times. Yeah. So you finished your leaving cert and you went to uni. Then you went to you went up to Dublin, Gerry, wasn't it?
Yeah, I went to DCU or NIHE as it was at the time. And I was one of the guinea pigs there because we started this new communications studies degree, and I got a place on that. I was a wannabe journalist in those days. That's what I was aiming for.
Yeah.
Yeah, and so I went to DCU as it is now and did a 3-year degree in communication studies. And that was it was like a bit of a culture shock, going to Dublin from this sort of posited existence that we had as boys in St Mary's, CBS, and Drogheda, and going to the big smoke. And you said earlier that I was one of the clever guys in the class, but you go to a university like that, and then you realize, oh my God, all these fellas and women are much cleverer than me.
Wow. Yeah.
Yeah, it's a little bit overawed, I think. Didn't have. I don't think growing up in a small town like Duleek, Drogheda, wasn't for me. Even going to Dublin was a bit of a culture shock. To meet all these self-confident women and men who had no problem talking and presenting. And here was I, the little bugman from Duleek.
Yeah.
It was pretty. I remember being pretty overawed about it.
Wow.
Feeling a little self-conscious, I guess.
Yeah.
Completely new experience.
Yeah. Because obviously ours was an all male school. In fact, I think the last year we got one female in the class, if I recall.
We did. Yeah, correct. Yeah.
So there was one female in
woman.
Yeah. I mean, everybody, it softened our cough. I tell you, we didn't know how to deal with it. Thinking about that, how did she deal with it? Fair play to her. She's, this fantastic,
confident young woman coming in and taking part in the classes in an all-boys school. Amazing. I can't remember why she came. Amazing.
So did you enjoy uni? Did you stay up in Dublin, Gerry, or?
No, I commuted actually, because DCU was in Glasnevin.
Yeah.
If you remember, or Ballymun actually. They always said it was Glasnevin, but it was really Ballymun.
Yeah.
And I just couldn't afford at the time. Couldn't afford gigs and stuff, and it was easier to commute. And commute for me many times meant hitching up and down to Dublin. Because I wouldn't have been going every day. But I remember walking from Glasnevin Avenue across into Finglas 2 or 3 days a week and just hitching a lift back to Duleek. The 25 miles or so that it was.
It's crazy, isn't it? Crazy when
it is.
Yeah, I did the same because we used to live the Dublin side of Drogheda, and I used hitch from our house I'd get a lift into Drogheda, walk across Drogheda, then hitch from Drogheda up to Dundalk and do the same again, which is it's
it was done then. I mean, I don't think it would remotely happen now.
No.
I don't think you see anybody hitching in Ireland now. Very rarely, I'd say. But it was quite common in those days. I mean, we all hitched lifts.
Yeah.
I remember hitching lifts sometimes to and from school. If I missed the bus or whatever, hitch a lift back to the league. Yeah.
And you'd get the lifts. That was the thing back then. You'd get lifts, You
would, yeah. I only ever got one dodgy lift. Some guy who started setting me up in the car.
Yeah, there was always a story about
one dodgy.
There was always one dodgy lift you got. I had a dodgy lift, and I remember my brother came in one time. He was in uni in Dublin, and he came in to my bedroom one time. He was only I suppose 19, and he said, I used to have a scout knife, and he came in. He goes, "I want your scout knife," and I goes, "What? I want your scout knife." he goes, I got a dodgy lift.
Yeah.
It was always one.
Yeah.
So
I remember you asked me, did I like university? I mean, yeah, I can't say I thoroughly enjoyed university years. I think I remember making the promise to myself after I finished I will never ever study again, ever. And then,
wow.
yeah, I just didn't like the experience that much. I mean, I got through it, and I got my degree and degree with honours, but yeah, I didn't particularly enjoy the experience, and I vowed never to study again, which I broke completely a couple of years back when I started a master's study and just finished 60 years of it.
Jeez, yeah.
I broke my promise to myself.
And so you're finished uni now. So what does Gerry do?
Yeah. I guess I at that stage I'd sort of given up on the plan to be a journalist. I tried to get into Rathmines. Remember the journalism course that they had. They still have. Didn't get into that. So communication studies was probably the next best thing. And I just started applying for jobs. That would have been 1983. So I started applying for jobs, and I was one of the lucky ones actually, because if you remember those years, Tony, were pretty tough in Ireland.
They were very sparse.
Many people.
Yeah,
many people emigrated. Most of the people that I was at college with couldn't find jobs. Excuse me, in Dublin or in Ireland, and I applied for a job in a PR company in Dublin, and I had a vague idea what PR was through my studies, and I went through this rigorous interview process. I think 4 interviews for a company called Murray Consultants, who are still there, and they're the biggest, or were the biggest, sort of corporate PR companies. They had many corporate clients like banks and pharmaceutical companies and that sort of thing. So I got taken on there as a junior account executive, and I remember the first salary. I remember getting the first salary letter. I think it was for, as far as I remember, I think it was £9,000 a year. I think that was my starting salary. And I started again, still commuting up to Upper Mount Street every day, getting the bus from Duleek and getting the bus back. For a few years, I spent, I think, almost 3 years in that company, and it was a real hard living ground. It was a tough place to work. They were very strict, and strict teachers in that sense. Lots of rules in the office, but very, very professional company. I learned a lot there, and I learned a lot from my first boss, who was an absolute gentleman, a man called Michael Colley, who used to be a PR guy for ESB before he went to Murray. So he's a lovely, lovely man. He taught me a lot. Yeah, and I stayed there for 2.5 years, commuting up and down from Duleek. And then I moved to, which was the biggest advertising company in Ireland at the time, McConnell's Advertising. And they had a PR company, which I got taken on as another account executive. And I stayed there, I think, for 10 years.
Wow.
I had the time of my life there. That was when I actually made the move to Dublin. And, I guess, I'm sort of living my life in a backwards way. I mean, my teenage years were very boring and not much happened, and I was a very good boy and very conscientious. And as soon as I moved to Dublin and discovered Dublin pubs and Dublin nightlife, it went horribly wrong. Went backwards.
All bets were off.
Went completely backward. My teenage years came with a vengeance in my mid-20s. In fact, I'm still having them here.
Yeah, you need a.
So,
I think you need a period where you need to have a blast, basically.
yeah, that was my period in Dublin, and you know, going out several times a week, going to gigs, many gigs. You know the story. Work, should we go and have one? Turned into
A session.
several more. Yeah. That was my life in Dublin for 10 years, and Dublin was my city. I never ever thought I would leave it. I loved it.
Go away.
It was my home from home. It was the place I felt at home and never wanted to leave. I never ever thought I would leave Dublin. I was never the sort of person who, you come across friends who always wanted to leave and go and go to Australia or go to America. Some of that was of necessity, of course. A lot of it was, especially in the 80s. But I never wanted that. Never, ever.
So what was the catalyst, Gerry?
The catalyst actually was Disney on Ice were a client of mine in McConnell's. And so I would have, done most of the promoting work for that show. When it came to Ireland. It first came to Ireland, I remember, in 1989. So, and every year it came back. So I started working for them as a client. And towards the end of the 90s, they just asked me, "Hey, do you want to join us? You're doing a great job there in Ireland, and we're looking for somebody to take over some of the markets and supervise some of the markets for us." And so, that was a dream job for me, it's just something that I'd always wanted. I loved the entertainment business. I loved working in that entertainment sector. Because, it was still like a marketing and sales and a publicist job, but it was in entertainment. It was completely different. It was much more informal. It was much more relaxed. It was still a corporate job. Very much a corporate job, an American corporate company, but the entertainment sector is different. So I took the job. I worked for them for 2 years, out of Dublin, out of my apartment in Dublin. But that's when I started traveling, like really traveling, and that was just for work trips, And I think I was at the beginning of those years. I was traveling like over 200 days a year. I was out in the country. It was a lot of traveling.
Yeah,
and it sort of struck me. I could live anywhere. I don't mind being here. I don't mind being in Australia. I don't mind being in America. Many trips to the States, and it sort of made me curious about other places. And then after 2 years, I got a promotion. They offered me a promotion to go and head the business, the European and Middle East business in Amsterdam. That's where they had the European office.
Wow.
And again, it wasn't something I hesitated about at all. It was, I go for it. No, I would have been in my 30s at that stage, late 30s, 36, 35, 36, I think. So yeah, talk about doing things in reverse, leaving home at 36 years of age. It was, I didn't have any hesitations about it at all. So even though, as I said to you, even though Dublin was my place, Dublin was my home, I just felt that, this is an opportunity that I have to do. This is going to be cool. So we live in Amsterdam, and working out of Amsterdam, why not, So that's when I left, 1998.
Wow. So Gerry, say, I've done a small bit of traveling, and with work, and I wouldn't be a big fan of it. It may be different in your case, just in terms of you're on your flight, you get your hotel, you get your hotel late, you're in wherever the company you're meeting the next morning, you work late, you're back to your hotel, you might have to go to dinner with people that you don't really know, you're back. So was it the case that was it something similar with you? I mean, if you're doing that 200 days of the year, that's a tough gig.
Yeah, you know, looking back on it, it was tough when it was, you know, at the end of my days there. I spent like 12 years, I think, with Failed Entertainment, as it's called. They had the licensee for this show, and yeah, it was one of the reasons that I decided to. One of the many reasons that I decided to leave. But you know, in the beginning, it was a huge adventure for the first few years because, you know, you're going into these arenas, you know, where all your favorite rock stars had played. You know, going to Wembley Arena, for example, and you know, dealing with some of the biggest and best promoters in Europe and the world. You know, that sector was fascinating, and yeah, every night entertaining. But that industry has so many characters who love to talk about themselves, and you know, I was in awe of that. You know, talking about these guys who, you know, brought Bob Dylan out for dinner the week before, and all the stories they had about bringing Mick Jagger home to their houses to meet their mother, and all of this stuff. You know, So it was fascinating. It's a fascinating industry. It really is, and I loved it. I loved the entertainment industry. I love that side of it, and I got a lot of free gigs out of it too. Yeah, wonderful gigs. Brilliant. So that was a perk. I remember sitting on the side of a stage in Germany, just me on a seat at the side of the stage, just looking at Bob Dylan, just right there in front of me. You know. As an example, and I rarely get starstruck, but I remember a story in being in Dublin, and I used to work with Dennis Desmond from NCD, you know, as you know, biggest gig promoter in Ireland and in Europe, one of the biggest. But anyway, he invited me and a colleague. He says, I have a gig tonight, small gig, and it was in, I can't even remember the name of the place. It was in Middle Abbey Street, above where, I'm trying to think. It's a small club. Doesn't matter. The name escapes me. It's closed many years since. So he said, yeah, who do you have? So, you know, I have Robert Plant. I said, what? Yeah, Robert Plant. So, yeah, of course I'll go. So we went to the gig, me and my colleague, Dave, and it was an amazing gig because Robert Plant he had his mates with him, and they called the band, I remember the name, they called themselves the Priory of Zion. No, the Priory of Brian, I think it was. And it was his mates, and he was playing all the songs that inspired him to become a musician and to set up, you know, to start with Led Zeppelin. Yeah. So he played all these old blues numbers, and it was a fantastic gig. And then after the gig, Dennis says, come upstairs and meet Robert, you know? Yeah, sure. Jeez. And so we went upstairs, and it was in a sort of a bar upstairs, and just introduced to Robert Plant, who was the most genuine and down-to-earth man you could meet, with this Brummie accent, who was fascinated about the fact that we worked for Disney on Ice because he brought his kids there. But, you know, at one stage, I just remember looking at him and just saying to myself, fuck me, I'm talking to Robert Plant. Yeah. You know, that was the only time I was starstruck. I just couldn't believe it. I'm talking to Robert Plant, you know, this rock icon. Yeah, you know, it's ridiculous. And that was the only time. It's ridiculous because, you know, they're just ordinary guys at the end of the day. We put all these people on pedestals, but they're, you know, in later years, I did some promoting myself. I went on tour with Americana bands. I'm jumping ahead here. I guess that doesn't matter. So I had the entertainment bug still in my system, and many years later, I still wanted to be a promoter. At this stage, I was living in Portugal, and I decided I would bring Americana acts over who are already touring in Europe and put them on tour in Ireland. Do a week circuit of a week around the pubs and clubs, and yeah, you're just going on the road with these people, you know, amazing stories, and seeing how hard they work to put on their gigs, and how hard that is to do it night after night after night. doing the same stuff, saying the same jokes, saying the same old lines. You know,
Wow.
it's a tough one.
Tough
So,
gig, yeah.
but yeah, tough gig. But yeah, that was the travel bug for me. You know, just to realize that I can live anywhere. And so I moved to Amsterdam in 1998, so 25 years ago, and been traveling ever since.
Yeah, it's funny. I think probably during COVID, people realized that you can actually work. You know, you can work from home, obviously, but you could be on a beach, in Tenerife, and you could be working, from there anywhere basically.
Yeah.
So you basically you twigged that a long time ago.
I guess so. We did have an office in Amsterdam, but we were rarely there. We were on the road. We were working from home. We were working from hotel rooms, backstage, the shows. You're right. I twigged that a long time ago. This office stuff. It's just a con.
Yeah. So
you have to go to an office and sit there for 8 hours a day. Who decided that? Who made that rule up?
Them. They did.
They did, exactly.
And we fell for it. But
yeah.
So that's very interesting. And then what prompted the change then again? You changed again after, was it 10 and a half years you were with them?
More, I think 12 years.
12 years.
So I say 12 years with Disney on Ice, living in Amsterdam, which is a fantastic experience. What a wonderful city, from all respects, but everything that you can be whatever you want to be in Amsterdam. Let's just put it that way, or whoever you want to be. It's that sort of a city. Love living there too.
And Gerry, you said before that you love Dublin, and how would you compare Amsterdam with Dublin? What would be the differences? What would be, the Dutch would, is the crack the same? Do they get the crack? You know where I'm going.
Yeah, no, that's a really good question. I ended up marrying a Dutch woman, Christina, and who I met in Texas, actually. Didn't even meet her in Holland. In Austin at South by Southwest Festival. When I was living in Amsterdam, actually. I'd have to say the first answer I'd give you that, the first 3 or 4 years I lived in Amsterdam was completely an expat life. I don't even know if I ever talked to a Dutch person, the first few years. It was very much an expat community there, hanging out with people from all over the world, going to gigs and going to the bars and stuff. So, I didn't get to know the Dutch culture and language until much later, till after I met Christina. The Dutch have a sense of humor, but it's a completely different sense of humor than the Irish.
Okay.
They do like to go out. They do like to have a drink. But there's a seriousness about the Dutch that the Irish don't necessarily have. It comes from, I think, from the Calvinist sort of background. They're very serious about their work and very serious about how important work is, and it's sort of a doing culture, very much.
Go ahead. Yeah.
Not completely spontaneous. That's very, very noticeable. So you can't drop in spontaneously to a Dutch person's house. They freak out because they have to have it written in their diary, weeks in advance. I'm serious,
Wow.
I remember going to my landlord at the time, just dropping into him, saying, coming out for a coffee. Oh God, no, I can't go out for a coffee. I haven't written it down in my diary, You can't come in here asking me to go for a coffee. So yeah, very different mentality. And I got to know the Dutch a lot better, obviously having married into them.
Yeah, because the Irish, they just arrive at your front door and nearly push their way past you for a cup of tea.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
But
You don't have the kettle on. Yeah.
I've encountered, I've worked with some Dutch people down through the years, and they've all been very pleasant and very nice and polite.
Yeah.
But I would say that they'll probably be a bit more direct. Where
completely.
Yeah, the Irish.
Oh yeah.
If we want,
yeah.
We kind of go around in circles.
I was going to say we have that. Sure, it's grand policy. Everything's grand.
Even at work, if you want something, you be kind of dancing around it. If you have the time by any chance. Whereas I just recall, I want this and I want it now, kind of thing. Yeah,
very, very, very direct. I'm not afraid to say what they mean to say. What they want to say in any situation. The typical couple of Irish people at a restaurant, they'd be giving out yards about the food and how terrible it is and rotten. The waiter will come over and say, How's your meal? Oh, it's grand. Oh, it's lovely. We just can't tell the truth that way, But the Dutch will just say, this is terrible,
Yeah.
It's completely unacceptable, blah, blah, just completely direct, yeah. So yeah, it was interesting dealing with Dutch people too, at work and different cultures. I mean, the job I had obviously was dealing with cultures all over the planet, and that was also a fascinating aspect of the job. Everywhere it's different ways of seeing things and doing business. And in the early years, the Americans would barge in and say, you got to sell the show this way, and the locals are saying it doesn't work this way in our country. You got to do it this way. I think the Americans learned a lot, how to respect the cultures of other countries, how different.
I know exactly what you mean.
Different ways things are done.
Yeah, I know exactly what you mean.
Yeah, and Amsterdam was a great experience, and I guess having met Christine is the adventurous one of the pair of us. I mean, that might sound a little bit strange.
That's a bit bizarre because you haven't stopped it. You haven't stopped traveling.
Yeah, but in terms of Christina, sort of planted the seeds about maybe life is a little bit different, or can be a little bit different. I was 100% focused on the job and loved it, and all the usual stuff. Ambitious, saving up for the pension for future years and for the retirement. All the stuff that many of us do. But different things happened during those years that sort of started to change my mind about what I was doing and why I was doing it. Now, one of them, for example, because I was working for an American company, they didn't pay any pension money for me because I wasn't an American citizen. So I had to, invest any excess money that I had in stocks and shares and build up my own pension. And I thought I knew it all. I had no clue, I lost everything in the financial crisis of 2008. And I literally mean everything that I had saved and built up for completely wiped out. And some people, I sort of surprised myself. Some people might have jumped off a bridge and or drank themselves to death or whatever. And I don't know. I guess it was without knowing it, was a sort of first dabbling in mindfulness, what I'm teaching now.
Yeah.
It was this sort of accepting what happened and saying, okay, now I have to think about my life and think about what's important, and maybe there's something different, because at the end of the day, this is all paper, it's all air. Everything that I thought I had disappeared overnight.
Yeah.
More or less.
So, Gerry, just so that was 2008, and had you met Christina at this stage, or
Yeah, I met Christina in 2001.
Oh, okay.
In Texas, as I said, and we got married in 2005. We had
and you lost everything. And then 2008, you lose everything. Yeah, that's really stressful situation.
Yeah. Well, it depends how you handle it. I guess, surprisingly enough, it didn't stress me out too much. and I don't know why. I don't know why that happened. Just maybe a reflection of my personality. It was more of an acceptance of, okay, this has happened, and how do I move on? So that was definitely also one of the big catalysts of saying, okay, there must be something else in life. I'm thinking, oh, this is important. And we decided that, you know, we would, I would leave the corporate life in 2009. It took me 3 years to actually take that step. It wasn't an easy step.
No.
You know, to give in my notice, you know, I doubted a lot about it. I thought about it because I was living the life, Tony. You know, traveling all over the world, beautiful apartment in Amsterdam, good money, and then you just sort of think, well, there is maybe more to life than this. There is maybe something else. And you know, work became a little bit more corporate. There were different acquisitions within the company. You know, the workload was getting heavier. The bonuses were getting smaller. You know, the rules of the bonuses were changing at randomly.
Yeah.
And you know, you sort of think, yeah, okay, maybe I should do something else. And you know, all of this sort of stuff were catalysts in different ways of saying, okay, now we'll move on. So I did give in a notice in 2009, and we left Amsterdam, and we took a year out. And you know, I'm saying doing everything in reverse. I took my year out when I was almost 50, and we went traveling. We went traveling, and we did it a little bit different. So instead of, you know, backpacking the world, we chose several places where we could stay for 2 or 3 months with a view to maybe settling in one of these places.
Okay.
So we went to Australia, Cape Town, Indonesia, Suriname, Caribbean, different places where we lived for 2 or 3 months. The plan was to go to Cape Town. I wanted to bring Disney on Ice to Cape Town. So I hadn't escaped the entertainment life. You know, Feld Entertainment was it's a big corporate concern, and they're also the owners of the Ringling Brothers Barnum and Bailey Circus, famous 3-ring circus. So I guess I ran away from the circus. So yeah.
The corporate circus. The corporate circus.
Yeah, corporate circus. Yeah. But I wanted to bring Disney on Ice to South Africa, and I found a partner to do that. But then my old company let me down. They decided to go with somebody else. You know, so you sort of think, you know, you'll work your arse off for 13 years, and you give them everything, and it doesn't really mean anything at the end of the day. They went for somebody with more money. Also, you know, hard learnings along the way. You know, you learn from this sort of stuff. But anyway, so Cape Town fell through, and we moved to. Decided to go to the Algarve, where a mate of mine had an apartment. He said, "You can borrow my apartment for 3 months," and we went to the Algarve and stayed there for 11 years. Loved it down there. Not in his apartment, I have to say.
Yeah.
But we spent 11 great years in a town called Lagos, and in the Algarve. So many Irish people have been on holidays there.
Yeah.
And loved it. But I guess, you know, the pair of us have a 10-year itch, because we started, you know, itching about moving away from the Algarve after 10 years being there.
So Gerry, what in that period in the Algarve, what did you do in terms of income and work and?
Yeah, so I still wanted to pursue, you know, the entertainment sector, to stay in the entertainment sector, but I wanted to try and do it on my own terms for myself.
Yeah.
Christina did various bits and pieces to keep the money coming in. I was lucky, not lucky. I didn't lose an apartment that I had in Dublin, which is giving me the apartment I lived in. So that was giving us some rental incomes to help us.
Sure.
To help us live in the Algarve too. And it gave me a bit of comfort to try these things myself. So the gigs I mentioned earlier was part of that. And I also tried to represent other touring companies, exhibitions, and sell them on to other promoters. But to be honest, Tony, none of it worked out. The gigs I did in Ireland, for example, over a period of 2 years, were the most expensive gigs I ever went to, because I ended up paying for them all, because nobody came to them. I remember sitting in Limerick, with an artist called Gerry Rickards. He's a very well-known singer-songwriter in the Americana sector. Nobody came to the show. It was me and Gerry.
Oh, jeez, yeah. Wow.
Yeah. I had a few good gigs, but not enough to make a living from it. It was another hard lesson.
Yeah.
To make it in the entertainment world, you need either a lot of money behind you, personal money, or backup money from investors or something. It just didn't work.
Yeah.
I also even bought a kids show with a Greek partner, and we called ourselves Green Bubble Entertainment. And I had to explain to him why, because bubble is a rhyming slang for Greek, bubble and squeak. So it was the Irish and Greek Green Bubble Entertainment. We bought a kids show, a dinosaur show, and we had that touring around different parts of the world, losing us any money that we had saved. But actually, we just managed to sell that on recently to somebody else. So we'll make our money back. We'll make our money back on that one.
Yeah, but I know. But I really have to take my hat off to you as well, because you weren't sitting on your hands. You were trying things. You were trying to be entrepreneurial and getting out there and just trying things. Which is huge, to be honest, in my view. Respect there.
Yeah, and I don't regret it. I mean, I think the trying is the main part of it. Whether you succeed or not, that's a different story. And I'm really glad that I tried these things. And even though they weren't successful, I wouldn't swap those experiences.
Yeah, exactly.
For the world,
And the other thing, Gerry, I'd say is that when the crash and you lost everything in 2008, like that could have been a slippery slope as well for a lot, for a lot of people. So to come out of that is a huge thing.
Yeah, and I guess as I said to you, it depends on what attitude you have about these sort of things. It's the same with businesses too. People have tried and failed and lost money and can't handle that or can't accept that. But it is what it is. You try things and you learn from that too. You get valuable lessons and valuable life lessons from everything that you try. And that's helped me, on the path that I've taken now.
Okay. So tell me about the path you've taken. You up sticks from Portugal.
Yeah. Well, while I was in Portugal, I'll give you a bit of background. So in 2015, we were invited by a very good friend of ours, Simon. He's an English man living in London and now moved to India. He's married to an Indian woman, and he turned 50, and he invited a very small group of friends and family to celebrate his 50th birthday in India. And it was a wonderful trip. Simon had made money in the banking world, and he treated all of us to this wonderful trip in India where we did all the touristy things. And then the final part of that was he booked this little retreat center close to the Himalayas. You could see the Himalayas out of the bedroom window. And part of that, being there for that week, there was also a yoga teacher as part of that group. American lady called Bristol, and he said, there's yoga every day, anybody who wants it. And I go, yoga schmoga, you know.
Yeah.
Airy fairy bullshit, you know. And I had no interest in anything like that whatsoever. It's funny, you know. I mentioned to you on a phone call. So in 2014, I lost both my parents in very close proximity to each other, within 2 weeks of each other.
Oh wow! Sorry.
In Duleek, they were still in Duleek. My mother had cancer, which came back, and she died on August 31st, 2014. My father, who was 81 at the time, he was a good age. He was never a day sick in his life until he realized that my mother wasn't going to make it.
Yeah.
And he fell apart. He literally fell apart in front of our eyes.
Jesus.
Had a stroke, blood poisoning. You know, ended up in the Lourdes Hospital in Drogheda.
Yeah.
And he died 12, 13 days later. Couldn't, you know, he was too sick even to go to my mother's funeral.
It's terrible. Yeah.
So, you know, I guess when something like that happens, with close family members or friends do pass on, you know, it does get you thinking about life. And I'm sure you're the same, Tony. You know, I've lost some friends along the way, along the years. And I guess I was sort of seeking something without knowing it, seeking some answers, because I think I'm still grieving at that stage. So anyway, I went to this yoga session, and I thought, oh my God, this is amazing. This sort of link between body and mind, and you know, how you don't make that link on the day-to-day level. We have a body and we have our mind, and we live in our minds mostly, and we disregard our body. But this sort of you know, body-mind link was it almost blew me away. And I said, there's something in this, and I think that was my first step on that path to discovering the benefits of meditation, and that led me to finding this master's in mindfulness-based teaching that's given in Bangor University in Wales, and I applied to do that 4 years ago as a part-time master's. And pre-COVID, I was going over and back to Bangor from Portugal to do, you know, weekend studies and stuff like that. So yeah, that trip to India was the first step on the path that got me going on this meditation and mindfulness path.
Yeah, I actually find it fascinating myself. I've dabbled in the yoga. I've done sessions actually with an Indian yoga teacher, and I've also dabbled with Tai Chi and also the mindfulness, just stuff I get online and books I read and stuff like that. But I remember on the Tai Chi, the instructor used to always have the incense burning and we'll say the monk's music at the end, and you'd go into you'd go on your knees. I used to always fall asleep after about 3 minutes. I'd be gone. It was so relaxing, you know. But you know, the mindfulness, I suppose the thing I picked up from it was just the whole breathing exercises. If I'm ever in a stressful situation, this 16-second breathing thing I just find it really good. But go ahead anyway on the mindfulness journey.
I started on the masters 4 years ago, and then in the meantime, so in 2021, just you know, during COVID times, at the peak of lockdowns, and we were in Holland at that time. We were back in Holland at that stage, just staying there for a few months, and we decided to go on holidays, and we wanted to go back to Cape Town again after 10 years or 12 years, but then Cape Town had a serious lockdown, so we decided just to come to Mozambique. And we've been to Mozambique before on holidays, but never to this place here. And we came to this town called Minfulness on the coast, and we stayed here for 3 months, and we liked it.
Wow.
And we were, you know, as I said earlier, there's a bit of a 10-year itch saying, okay, what are we going to do in the Algarve? What, we've done a lot. What are the prospects here? Are we going to stay here? And then, I was still doing the masters at that point, but I saw opportunities here. Christina always wanted to live in Africa. She's a real Africa file, loves Africa, loves traveling here. And, I also saw opportunities here. It's a lovely part of the coast. It's a tourist town, beautiful lodges. I'm living opposite a group of islands. I can see them right over here.
Wow.
Or the Bazaruto Archipelago. There they are. Look, I'll show you. It's like, I don't know if you can see the sea. It's the Indian Ocean there. I can't see it in the light.
Beautiful. I mean, I can't see it, but I can see it's not raining anyway.
No, it's not. Bloody hot. But anyway, we decided, that there were opportunities here, to maybe develop retreats for the tourist market. And
very good. And
do other things here. So, I mean, we came here a year ago, probably exactly a year ago today, and we've been settling in a new continent, in a new country, which is challenging to say the least, but it's been good, and I've been developing the mindfulness stuff quite slowly, I have to say, because I think I'm probably the only person in the entire country, in Mozambique, who's doing this stuff.
Wow.
So I'm talking with a lot of lodges and accommodations about doing retreats and doing mindfulness packages for their clients. I'm teaching online. I teach an 8-week course on mindfulness-based stress reduction, which I teach face-to-face, but also online. I've been mentoring people online, and I've also been teaching at schools here. I did a special training, teach kids.
Very good.
Something I never, ever, ever planned or thought I would be doing.
Yeah.
But just decided to do it here and teach at one of the international schools, a 3-month program, which was absolutely amazing, because I don't know who ended up teaching who. The kids taught me an awful lot.
Go away.
Amazing experience.
And Gerry, so if I wanted to go on a retreat with Gerry Rickards in Mozambique, have you website? Have you?
I do. My website is just up and running, and it's called Mindwise. Is the company, so it's mindwise.me. I'm actually going back to Portugal to do a retreat next year too, which is really nice. Looking forward to that, and hopefully in Ireland too.
Brilliant.
I've got a few ideas that I'd like to put into place, all in its own time. I think, for me, mindfulness has also given me a lot personally in terms of the practice that it's given me and helped me see things in different ways, relate to things in a different way. That's what I love teaching. Teaching people to see their mind to relate to their thoughts in a different way.
Yeah.
Because a lot of us are imprisoned by our thoughts. We think all the time, and we believe in what we think all the time. We believe that everything we think is true, and we actually cause ourselves a lot of grief and suffering sometimes because of that. A lot of us live in the past or live for a future that actually hasn't happened, and when it does, it doesn't happen the way you think it's going to happen. So,
exactly. Yeah.
All we have is really now, and that sounds like a cliche, but it's absolutely true. All we have is this moment. In this moment shapes our next moment, and so on and so forth.
Yeah. And it's very difficult. You may have stuff racing around your head and worrying about things in the future, that might happen, but invariably don't happen. And it's I guess what the mindfulness, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, is that to manage those thoughts and
to relate to those thoughts differently. I mean, we can't stop our thinking. I mean, we're thinking creatures. The only time we'll stop thinking is when we're in a box 6 feet under, But you can relate to that thinking in a different way. That's what mindfulness. That's what I like to teach in mindfulness.
Yeah, it's fascinating. I've said this, and I don't know. I don't know why I keep saying it. I've said it on a couple of podcasts before, but actually, I think mindfulness is so. It's a common theme running around at the moment. But yeah, there's a guy in Limerick he has his own radio show as well, Dermot Whelan. He's a great book, Mindful. I just listened to the audio book, but I found it really, really good. And I think there's a huge amount to it as well. And I think people are learning more and more about it, which is great,
Yeah. I think too many of us have, I said it earlier when I talked about the yoga, we do look after our bodies from a health perspective, go to the gym and we eat well, but how many of us actually take care of our minds? We tend to neglect our minds and what our minds can actually do for us and how we can work with our minds and treat it just as gently and kindly as we do our bodies. I think it's very important,
Yeah, it's fascinating stuff.
Yeah, indeed.
So that's Gerry Rickards' kind of history, colourful travel history. So I guess really the future, Gerry, is on the whole mindful, journey. And is Mozambique home now? It is.
Mozambique is home for now. And we will stay here for at least a couple of years and reevaluate. I have to say, we both miss Portugal. The Algarve is beautiful. Portugal is a beautiful country.
Yeah,
great people. We have lots of friends there. We miss that. But Mozambique also and Africa has a lot to offer too. It's the African people. They're very mindful in themselves. They see life in a completely different perspective. They see the end of life in a different perspective and how they live and so on. It's a pretty amazing experience to be here. Not always easy, I have to say. And not always, it's challenging. It can be challenging. It's got many, many good things about it too. It's very beautiful here. It's a whole continent to be explored too. It's an amazing continent. It really is. We'll see. Maybe we'll get another itch in 10 years, but that stage will be pushing 70.
Jeez.
You believe that?
Gerry, we'll have to cut it here.
Hang on. I just want to say one thing. I'm seeing the guitar behind you. I still want to be a rock star, so maybe we should join that band before it's too late,
Yeah, well, Gerry, you could play the guitar, right? But I'll have to be the front man. I'll have to be the front man.
I'll have to fight you for that one. Yeah. We all want to be the front man, don't we,
Yeah. Listen, Gerry, it's been a pleasure, I have to say. And, I'm desperate because I just lose contact. It's gone back. Yeah. You get caught up in your own life and your own work and families but we're not going to leave it another 40 years because we'll be both pushing up daisies.
Yeah, we certainly will. Yeah, just about. I'd say
just about. Listen, we'll keep in contact, and Gerry,
we will for sure.
Listen, I really appreciate you giving the time, and it was an absolutely fascinating story, I have to say, and I hope the listeners really appreciate it. I know I do, and I wish you all the best, and Christina the best, and with the business as well. I'm going to call it a business, but I know it's more kind of a state of mind, or it's a passion, I guess. So I wish you all the best with that as well.
Thank you, and again, same here. Great to talk to you after all those years, and we'll definitely keep in touch and sharing the stories.
I have one more thing to say to you. You're making me sick.
Why are you making me sick?
You were so stupid. Gerry, take care.
Goodbye, Tony.
All the best.
You too.
Cheerio now.
Thanks.
Bye. Bye-bye. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Thanks everyone for listening to this week's episode of Irish by the Grace of God.
If you like it, please share it with your friends and family, and check out our website shows.acast.com/IrishByTheGraceOfGod-podcast. Here you'll find all our social media pages to make contact. If you know of any Irish people living abroad with an interesting tale, we'd love to hear from you. Thank you, and tune in next week. Bye bye.